What are angels? What do they do? What do they look like? Well, let's tackle these questions about angels in our season of Applied Theology in a new episode of C28. Well, this is, I guess, officially episode one. We had a couple intro videos and launch videos, and so this is our first one tackling the subject in a season committed to applied theology, taking theology and then applying it into our lives. And so this one is angels. I got some guests here. If you could take a minute and introduce yourself for those. I know both you guys have already been in different C28 videos, but introduce yourselves for those who haven't seen you before.
My name is Tom Menley.
And I'm Andrew Lemley.
A little bit about you.
Yeah, that's right. We've been coming to Cornerstone for a little over 5 years now. My wife, Jessica.
Aww, so cute.
Ellis and Liana. And we're involved with different media ministries, including the YouTube channel and some of the website and social media.
And we've been coming about 8 years now. My wife, Cherry, and myself, and we're involved in a lot of ministries that we enjoy. And my wife heads up the women's ministry. I do discipleship is where my call is, and so we enjoy that.
Very good. Yeah, I guess before we jump into the topic, I guess I did want to raise some eyebrows here. Here's this may be tentative, but it probably won't be. These are the episodes we have coming up. We have 12 scheduled for this season. The episodes will drop approximately every 2 weeks. And this first one is angels. We have the lie of self-care, biblical sacrifice, service, and love, kind of comparing those two together, what the Bible has to say about it. Now we're talking about angels in this episode. So like you just saw, we have Andrew and Tom. The first biblical appearance of an angel, I believe, is Genesis chapter 3. So pretty early on in Scripture, verse 24, we have the angel. I believe it's the angel that's guarding Garden of Eden after they're exiled and they got the flaming swords and they're blocking it off. So why don't you guys take off with what has been on your minds thinking about this topic?
You know, I'm thinking about this. I think about how God is perfect. He has a perfect plan. He audibly speaks, and it happens. He created angels by just speaking it out, and it happens. And they're perfectly suited in their environment. So in other words, they have 6 wings, 2 to cover their eyes, or 2 to cover their feet, and then 2 to fly. And so it amazes me how God just creates. Whatever he creates, it's perfect in its environment. Including angels.
Yeah,
that's interesting. And yeah, I think I listened to something similar, Tom, with talking about how 6 wings to us might not make sense, and I think if they're only using 2 to fly, what's the purpose of the rest? But God shows that He's built these creatures with purpose, just as He's built us with a special purpose, and that us as creatures and angels as creatures are completely different in the jobs and roles that we play.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys both start out with the creation point of them. In Job chapter 38, verses 4 through 7 is one of the proof texts that we'd use of the angels being created. It says, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you know so much. Who determined its dimensions and stretched out the surveying line? What supports its foundation and who laid its cornerstone? As the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy." And so there's this part of the creation in the beginning and what God has created. And then there you find the angels as well. So.
The angels being present for creation was something I hadn't really caught before. Before, going back and revisiting some of the angel series that we've done and refreshing my memory on some of that. But that verse in Job kind of surprised me, even though, I think I knew it, but just the concept of God having the angels present with him during creation is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah. So I think if I think through popular questions, when people are like, "Oh, angels," I'm looking forward to listening to that. What are some of the things you think come to mind for you guys, and what's some of the information you guys would give on those questions?
I think guardian angels is one that comes to mind, right? Like what role do angels play in our present society as believers? Is it just believers, or are there instances in which angels interact with the environment or people or humanity in general? Like that kind of question is, I think, really common and interesting. So
each person have their own personal guardian angel?
I don't think so, but we'll see by the end of the conversation.
Hey, you know what the Bible says? Don't drive faster than your angel can fly, right? So.
Which verse is that?
Yeah, First Androlonians.
There you go.
No, it for anybody listening, it doesn't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the angel you have dangling from your rearview mirror. It has a little tagline that says, yeah. No, but I think that what their purpose is, like, why are there angels? I think that would that even falls into this category of applied theology. How does it kind of come into our lives, the reality that there are angels? Any thoughts?
I think about angels being present before God and in heaven. What's their purpose there? And they're to honor and praise and sing praises to Him constantly. So they're constantly saying, "Holy, holy, holy," those type things. And so I think about that. Then I also think about their how do they minister to us as believers as well. So I think it's interesting. The function of angels are pretty broad.
Yeah.
Sproul had a succinct way of defining it. He said there's servants and there's sons, and that those are the creation, right? So we have servants or angels, sons or man, and they have a totally different role. Tom mentioned, attending the throne and the heavenly choir, and their role in that sense. And then there's a couple other roles that I just picked little tidbits out of, but as the attendant, so the heavenly host, we have that in like doxology and hymns talking about the heavenly host. So what that is, angels as messengers, angels as ministers, and then you have the protectors, enforcers type of, like you mentioned in Genesis, guarding the Garden of Eden from not letting evil come back in after the fall. So,
yeah, I think in Hebrews chapter 1, Hebrews is kind of one of its main purposes is showing that Jesus is the ultimate high priest now and forever, mediating between us and God the Father. And in that, the author goes and explains that like Jesus is higher than this, Jesus is higher than this, Jesus is higher than this, and along that way. We get to Hebrews chapter 1, verses 13 through 14. It says, "And to which of the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet'?" The answer is no, or none. And then verse 14, "Are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation?" And then to Tom's point, we do have Revelation chapter 5, where it shows this picture of the angels worshiping God, to which, again, that's the role of the angels is worshiping God and glorifying Him. But we see this, they're ministering spirits. So what does that look like? Angels ministering for God, in at least in part of their roles to us, right?
I think they're used to enact God's will and authority, and ministering to us could come in a variety of forms, but we see them, bringing messages. We see them even coming with some form of authority at times. So angels appear, and in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see, angels appear in different forms that come in human form and deliver messages. Sometimes we see punishments doled out by angels, right? So there's angels.
Give me an example.
So striking Zechariah with mute, makes him mute because he doubts the message, right? Coming that John the Baptist is going to be born, and then I think there's a verse, I don't recall where an angel strikes somebody with blindness too. So they have power. they come with authority, but they're not acting on their own accord. They're just exacting the will of the Father. So they're coming with his authority.
Yeah. And there was a wrestling match.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That'd be pretty fun. I wouldn't choose to wrestle. I wouldn't wrestle it. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrestled for hours. I can't wrestle with my kids for 10 minutes without being out of breath.
I think about it, angels means messenger. And so they're given a message, and every time they give a message or they present themselves before people, the response that's always there. And they have to constantly tell them, hey, stand up. Well, I'm not here to hurt you type thing. And so that response seems to be very common as they interact with people.
Mm-hmm. So when we're interacting with them, as far as what the Bible teaches us, what does the Bible teach us we should be expecting when we engage an angel? You know what I mean? I think that'd be a question our listeners would have. They'd be like, tell me then, like if there's angels, they're created by God and they're ministering spirits, and part of that ministering is for God to us, then, what does that look like when I come in contact with an angel? Do you guys have any just stories you've heard about angels?
I think you can't call upon an angel at will, right? So if we're talking like guardian angels or something, you can't like tap into your angel and use them, to your abilities or anything like that. It's more that, God might use an angel to answer prayer, or like we see in Daniel is in the lion's den. It says an angel came in and closed the mouth of the lion, right? And so there might be an angel at work in types of protection. That's, a scriptural reference, but there's a lot of anecdotal, or like you see a video or something of somebody like moving just at the right time before
Let me do one.
An obstacle. You have one?
Yeah.
I knew you would have one. Yeah.
So
that could be angelic and intervention.
Yeah. So I'll give you right now I can remember one. Maybe when I'm telling this one, another one will come up. But this was told from a reputable source. It hasn't been debunked like somebody will be in a car wreck and they're like, there was an angel there, and the lady calls in and was like, no, I was there. I just left when the paramedics got there. Mm-hmm. This one, this is how it goes. Imagine, you listeners, you're walking up to a mall that is not very popular. There's not a lot of people there, but there's a large staircase, like 40 feet wide, and it goes up, like 30 steps, and there's a railing down the center of it, and then an ADA or a wheelchair ramp on one side. And then you walk up there, and at the top, there's an ATM, and then also the sidewalk to all the stores there. So this man comes and he walks up these stairs and uses the ATM, and he turns around and he's going to go down the stairs, and he looks over and he sees somebody trying to get up the wheelchair ramp and is struggling. It's an older person struggling to like push himself up this wheelchair ramp. And so as he grabs the railing in the center, he stops and he looks over there, and then he walks around, leaves the center, goes to the edge and walks down. And just as he puts his hands on the wheelchair to help the person, a car comes barreling in and up the stairs and crashes into the center of that handrail, right where he would have been, and arguably would have been dead. And so when he sees that car wreck, happen, they kind of flinch. And when he looks back to see if the old guy in the wheelchair is okay, there's no old guy in a wheelchair. And so his account is that he believes that was an angel that had kind of appeared there and manifested in that way to draw his attention away from that car wreck that was going to happen that would have killed him. And then so obviously when the crash had happened, the angel disappeared and there was no person in a wheelchair.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's one of those things that's like so easily dismissed, I think, and because it's like outside the realm of what people are comfortable with.
Yeah, weren't you saying something earlier? So we cheated. Andrew and I cheated a little bit today.
Yeah, a little bit.
We've been sharing an office building, and he was telling me a little bit about, we're almost more apt to believe when somebody says that they'd seen an alien, and we're like, oh really? Like was it a flying saucer? Was it this or that? But when somebody says an angel, we're like, wow, psycho.
Yeah, like they'll actually, if you claim you've seen an alien, people will be like, oh, where? Show me where. Like, where's the markings? And they'll go look and try to investigate that because they're interested and want to uncover the truth. But yeah, for angels, they dismiss it right away. It's like mythology,
Yeah, no, for sure. I did. I spent a little bit of my time today looking at YouTube videos on angel on angel encounters.
What did you learn or unlearn?
I learned that I think bugs look like angels in security cameras.
Oh, the little glowing orb.
Yeah, or like
Yeah,
as they're
of light.
flying away, it's
Yeah.
But in the end, there were some that were like it very well could have been angels interceding, or it could have been some I think were pretty obviously lightning or something. But there's unexplainable things, and what I do know coming out of this, kind of getting more practical, is that I am confident that angels intercede for us and intervene and interact with us. And so I will not rule out those types of things happening. I don't think that happens very often in the sense where we can see it. I think that throughout Scripture, we see several instances of it over the course of thousands of years. And so it's not very often we see them, but we know that these angels are created with this purpose, and they are ministering to us and guarding us and protecting us and bringing words to us and stuff like that. But I think that some of that stuff in New Testament time, when we have the Word of God, probably changed a little bit as well. But I still think they're there doing their thing.
Yeah, I don't think they're used for special revelation anymore.
Right.
Because we have Scripture.
Yeah, I think that'd be very rare if that happens. I do got a couple instances in the Bible to help us see how angels interacted scripturally, and then we can, probably anticipate that that'd be a decent example of potentially how that could happen here. Let's see, Genesis 18 and 19. Oh yeah, so this is when Abraham's in his tent, and he looks up out of his tent and he sees three men, and one of the men identifies himself as Lord, and they end up knowing that it's the Lord now manifesting himself in a physical manner. And talking to him about, you'll have a son by the next time I visit you and stuff like that. But then it leaves the reader thinking like, what's these other two? And then in verse 19, verse 1, it comes around and it says, that evening the two angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. And so then it identifies who the other two were. They were angels. And what we see is that those angels came and they were in human form. And they weren't scary at that time. They were coming... And it appeared like two men is the way it's described.
Is that the instance where, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but where Abraham bows or offers some kind of worship of some sort, and there's like he's not rebuked, and so that's how we know that third angel was like a Christophany or something on that Christophany, that term.
Yeah,
where it's
a theophany. Yeah. Gosh, I don't know.
Because so angels are creatures, right? And so we can't worship creation.
Right. I know what you're talking about.
But Abraham's not rebuked for that. So that's where I think theologians say the third angel is set apart.
Remember.
Yeah, it's set apart though.
Right.
And then there's one where the angel shows up, and this is what we mostly see, right? Angels show up and they're scary.
Yeah.
When they show up in their angelic form. And I'd be curious to see kind of what our thoughts are on what those types of angels look like here. So in Luke chapter 2, you got the shepherds in the field. They show up to these probably rough and gruff dudes out in a field. And it says that they were terrified. Phobeo is the word there. And that's that's a word used like when somebody's so frightened, like frightened to run, and so they were frightening. And oftentimes we see people like they do kind of cower, they bow, not necessarily out of worship, but like out of fear, and they say, "Hey, you don't have to be afraid." But all they know is like there's something spiritually great right here, and it's not unusual for them to say, "I'm not the Lord," or something like that. Right. And or they're the angel of the Lord. So, anyways, there's one that's not scary, appearing like a man, and then the other one is like probably more in their angelic form, in a physical sense, and it's very scary. Right?
Yeah. The I think the one Tom described as the seraphim is like the less scary. 6 wings covering their face and stuff. That still sounds.
That's because when you say cherubim, you think of a cherub.
Well, you think of a little baby, but the cherubim is the one that I wrote down the description. So 4 faces, that of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, 4 feet like a calf, and 4 wings. And then that's also like the cherubs attend the throne of God, and I think it's Ezekiel. He talks about the vision he gets of. It's like intersecting wheels.
Yeah, I got that one. You want me to read it?
Yeah, it's
I'll read it.
It's so beyond bizarre to imagine.
Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 15 through 17.
Yeah.
Now, as I look at the living creatures, behold, a wheel was on the earth beside each living creature with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their workings was like the color of beryl, and all 4 had the same likeness. The appearance of their workings was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. When they moved, they went toward one another of 4 directions. They did not turn aside when they went.
Imagine that telling you, be not afraid.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it makes sense. You're like, oh, good, because the whole wheels and eyes thing were scaring me.
Yeah, and 4 faces.
Ezekiel chapter 10 says their entire bodies, including their backs, hands, and wings, were full of eyes all around, as were their 4 wheels. So that's, yeah.
Yeah.
So that they can see God's glory from every direction. They don't have to turn. And that's the other thing is the cherub was the one that actually blocked the Garden of Eden and was carrying the sword.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, that's even more intimidating to imagine.
Yeah.
You know, another way we can expect to interact with angels, as we're talking about applied theology, so they have these different forms, but oftentimes we see that. So when you think of like an angel on top of the Christmas tree, describe what that angel typically looks like.
Oh, white pure clothing with a set of wings and really soft features, right?
Yeah. Okay. Feminine or masculine?
Typically feminine.
Yeah.
Feminine, yeah.
Usually in some sort of white dress, like you're saying. Very name one time you see a female angel.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because angels are neither male nor female, right? Because they're spirits. But when they tend to appear to humankind, they have never appeared as female. They're very they appear male when they're in human form. They're male, and it's interesting that our culture then takes angels and then somehow, and I'm not sure how it started. I'm curious. I didn't spend time on it because this is raw conversation about angels, right? But what happened where we have a biblical account of angels, which is like scary and eyes and wheels turning within them, and then different faces with animals on them and wings. And then when we get to, Hollywood, they're frail females that are beautiful and comforting. And I'm not saying that angels weren't comforting in those things, but typically they were very strong and scary, and brutish.
I think it's just an attempt to obscure the truth.
Yeah, maybe. Anyways. Yeah. So one of the ways that we would end up in engaging these angels, the Bible speaks to us about that. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Why? For thereby some have entertained angels unawares. And so that would mean, again, that although angels can appear and just drop us to our knees in fear, times in their mission, they'll take on a form that you don't even notice them. Right. And yet they're still interacting with us. And we're told, hey, don't neglect to show hospitality to strangers. And one of the reasons given is that one of them might be an angel. I mean, testing, I don't know, but it might be an angel and you won't even know it. And so in that sense, I wouldn't be surprised if all of us have in some way, one or another, have entertained an angel unaware.
It doesn't mean you can earn favor, even if it is an angel, right, that you're interacting with. We can't.
I would try.
Well, just kidding.
Just kidding.
Works versus grace, but it does make you think twice though about who or what you might be interacting with. If you're put in a situation where you can willfully grant hospitality, like Abraham did.
Yeah. I got another. If you guys don't have anything,
go for it.
I got another. I was just kind of looking in the Bible for different times like angels have been spoken about, and there's this wild one. I've never read it before. Like I feel at our church we're preaching through Exodus, and I feel like I'm like in a freshman in college, like going through Exodus. I'm learning so much, but I feel this way when I was in 2 Kings chapter 6. So I'm gonna try to get this paint this picture as quick as I can. So there's a battle going on. And long story short, it comes to the point in this battle where this person wakes up and he's surrounded by the enemy's army, and he's scared, obviously. And Elijah is a prophet at this time, and he's been working with this guy, and God's been speaking to him about the tactics of the enemy army. And so anyways, now he wakes up and he's surrounded by this army. It says there's chariots and there's people on horses and stuff, and their swords are drawn. He thinks he's a dead man. And it says in Second Kings, Elijah says, there are more of us than there are of them. And this man, imagine like, no, there's 2 of us and 10,000 of them. And then Elijah says a prayer and says, Lord, let him see what you're doing. And it says that the Lord opened his eyes, and he sees on the hillsides horses and chariots and fire. The spiritual battle that was there ready to fight fight for him. He couldn't even see it, right? Because they're in their spirit form, but yet they were there, and he was worried, and he didn't have to be. Mm-hmm. And so I can only imagine how many times angels are interceding in that sense, right? In a quiet, almost quiet sense, where we don't see him, and hear Elijah prays. And what a wild prayer that would be if you find yourself in a scenario and say you pray, Lord, open my eyes to see like the spiritual battle that's happening. I don't know if I'd want to say that prayer, actually. That'd be wild.
Yeah. And they end up saving him, right? From the Arameans.
Yes. Yeah. Doesn't he he makes the army blind, and then they lead him out somewhere else, and then they make him see. And then he's asking, like, should I just kill them all? and the Lord says, and this is all just from memory, I'm doing my best here. He says, no, basically like feed them, take care of them, and send them back home. And I assume part of that is these guys go back, right? Like, what happened? Like, we're about to attack, and this man who's protected by this God, we all went blind, and then he led us to Samaria? No. I can't remember. He leads them to some city that starts with an S. And then, they all can see, and they realize they've been led, astray. And then he's cared for and sent back to bring that message that's going to strike fear, into everyone and glorify God. So
I had a question that just popped in my head.
Yeah.
It's going back like 5 minutes, but
that's all right.
It just popped in. Do you think it's idolatry to place a classic looking angel on top of your tree and have that on display in your home?
Never even thought about it.
I just did. I'm like, because we talked about how we think the popular representation of angels, we know it's not accurate, but have we gotten so accustomed or used to seeing it that we've kind of normalized giving it an elevated place during, a specific season?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's an interesting one.
So, what in your illustration? What is the intent of that person?
Right? Is it just a decoration, or do you think?
Yeah, or is it just remind you that there's ministering spirits?
Yeah.
Sent out by God to minister to us, and
even if the depiction's not perfect, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we see a lot of pictures of Jesus in people's houses,
not accurate.
and he's like, a white guy with blue eyes. I'm like, he's from the Middle East. I don't think he's a white guy with blue eyes. So, and I wouldn't say that's idolatry, but if you're putting an angel on top of a tree and you give some credit to that angel that belongs to God, I think that would fit that as idolatry.
Like if you're thinking that's, a representation of like my personal guardian angel that's in my home, and it's
and your faith and trust is in guardian angels. Yeah.
But it's just an object. Yeah.
And that's applied theology right there. Oh, shoot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be definitely a matter of the heart. If you're worshiping that angel, then that could be considered very well.
Golly, what about any other applied stuff? What about this? This is a sensitive one. I've even found myself comforted by the phrase earlier on in my life, and I had to come to terms with like teaching myself not to say this or believe this, but when people die, if we believe what the Bible said, which we already talked about, that they were created by God, then when we die, we don't become angels.
Right.
And that's, popular theology paints that picture, right? Hollywood paints that picture. I think even Christians with good faith accidentally fall into this, like mainly when you have, a loved one die, right? Well, heaven has a new angel. And I think it's just important for us to know. I mean, personally, I would say, so we had a daughter of ours die, Emma, and, we had people say, well, she's an angel in heaven now. And it was the first time I remember being like, no, like, I don't want her to be an angel in heaven. I want her to be a daughter of God's in heaven with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want for her. And I obviously didn't say that to anybody. Like, I was far more gracious than that. But I think that it's so much better to go to heaven and be a son or daughter of Jesus Christ, or son or daughter of God the Father, than to be an angel. And so when we die, we don't become angels.
I think it's usually an innocent misunderstanding of angelology.
Sure.
I don't know. So yeah, most people, when they think that, it's probably from their whole life of hearing, like they're in heaven watching over us now, like after somebody. And so you get the idea of they're up there watching over us. And then you have the idea of like, that's a role of angels, is being in heaven and interceding and watching over us. And so it kind of merges, I think, at some point, but making sure we do understand that there's a distinct role for angels in creation, and that we don't change into angels. We don't change into a different creation.
Yeah.
We're human. We have a specific redemption plan to get to a specific end.
Yeah.
And like our role and our destination's clear.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the Hebrews, it also teaches us that it says that angels were created a little higher, but yet we have a role in judging them. I'll try to find the text if one of you guys carry the conversation for a moment.
Sure.
I'll see if I can find it.
What did we not hit yet?
Talk about...
I had a couple more
go
examples.
ahead.
So of ways in which angels are protectors. So I gave the example, I think, of like Daniel being in the lion pit, and angel comes in and closes the jaws of the lion. There's another area where prayers are answered. So angels could be used to answer a prayer. When Peter is in prison, he's the church is praying for him for his release, and an angel comes and actually releases him from prison. So the idea that God can use an angel to answer a prayer, or use an angel to bring a message or provide protection as part of the like ministry of angels was interesting to me. And then providing encouragement. So this was this is, I think it's Psalms. I might've written it down. Yeah. Psalm 91. When Satan in Matthew, and Satan quotes Psalm 91 and is saying that angels will protect you from falling. If you jump, you won't strike your foot on the stone and stuff. And obviously it was a misquote to try to tempt Jesus, but that was interesting to me that back in Psalms in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, Jesus is familiar with that and familiar with the role of angels as protectors. And that Psalm 91 says that, that's one of the roles of angels, but you can't test it or tempt it, right? So even if angels do have the ability to protect, we're not to put that to the test or pray directly to angels or pray for things from angels. It's all to go through the Father. If he wishes to use an angel as an instrument in answering a prayer, providing protection, that's, his will. Yeah. And he can do so.
So I did find that passage. Just so in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 3 through 4, it says, "Do you not know that we will judge the angels?" And then if we go to Hebrews chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, it says, "It is not to angels that he has subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking, but there is a place where some has testified, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, a son of man that you care for him? You made them a little lower than angels. You crowned them with glory and honor and put everything under their feet." So, anyways, there's this interesting little lower than angels, but then there's a part of judging them. And so I think another thing to consider, what is the judging? Can angels sin or rebel against God? Anybody?
Well, they do rebel against God, right? And
well, they did.
They
did.
For sure. Yeah, I guess past tense is better, right? So fallen angels, and there's a verse that talks about Satan being the lowercase g, God of this world or of this age, and that his minions or legion are made up of demons, which are fallen angels that worship him instead of
So a teaser
God, right?
for the demon side, and this is going to blow a lot of people's mind. Are you saying that demons are fallen angels?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And we'll get to that in another episode.
Yeah, I think episode 3 or 4 or something like that.
So, but there's no redemption plan that we're aware of for fallen angels, the way that there's a redemption plan in from our sin.
So here's the question for us, spoiler alert, we don't have the answer, but here's the question. If angels at once had sinned, rebelled against God, taken allegiance with lowercase g Satan, can or do angels continue to do that? Are there still angels falling? Or is that a one rebellion?
Yeah, no clue on that.
Good question though, right?
That is a good question.
That's a gear turner.
Yeah. Another applied theology question coming from my 12-year-old daughter. She says, I think my son Blake had brought this up also, but she said, Dad, was Eden on earth? I said, yes. And she goes, and when Adam and Eve sinned, they were kicked out of the garden, right? Yes. And they're like, and then there was like an angel that guarded the garden. And I go, yes. And she asked why. And I spoke about the tree of life, and that, if there was no like physical death and resurrection, and we went on through that. And she that wasn't her point. I thought that was her point. Her point was this: well, wouldn't we be able to still go there right now and find those angels still guarding the garden?
Yeah, or was it a temporary thing? Did it expire?
I didn't have an answer.
That is a
I had
good
to look
question.
like a fool.
12-year-olds are the best.
Logically you would think yes, but
Yeah.
that is a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that our faith, Christianity's got more archaeological proofs and artifacts and things like that apologetics, right, that do substantiate, but our faith isn't dependent on those. So whether the Garden of Eden still exists or we found where it's at does not affect the strength of our faith, right? So we don't need the proof of the Garden of Eden to know that it was real.
Yeah. I like to bring this up as much as I can. And that's that our country is representative of the entire world in the sense of the percentage of people that believe in that there's a higher power, spiritual world. And that's 87%. So that means, if my math's correct, that means there's 13% that say, no, there's no higher power. There's no spiritual world. And then, so for me, I look at that, I'm like, oh, well, like in any other sense, that would mean everybody, right? Like if you had 13% that didn't believe something, you'd still say, well, everybody believes that there's a spiritual world. And so for me, part of that spiritual world then is obviously angels and demons. And then there's a part of us that has a soul and the Spirit of God dwells within us. That's how close the Son is with us. And so this whole spiritual world thing, including the aspect of angels, is incredible to me. And I'm going to argue this. We have a guest I'm trying to rope in right now for the demons. We already got one. There's a second one I'm trying to rope in. And he's associated with some missionaries in Haiti, pretty close with them. And what I hope to get from there is how prevalent the demonic, the fallen angel oppression and possession, how real that is. And we can hear real stories of the spiritual world attacking people coming to faith in Jesus Christ, and the casting out of demons that have possessed people. And so I'm looking forward to that side of the spiritual world also. But I mean, it's there. And so for me, I think that angels are just as active as demons, right? And so I look at, then what is their job? Their job is not necessarily specifically, we all have a guardian angel that we're praying to, because that's robbing Jesus of what belongs to him. So we still pray to Jesus, but some of those works are going to be carried out because of God's sovereignty to then be carried out by those angels. And so they're ministering to us, and sometimes that's in words, sometimes that's encouragement, sometimes that's intervention. Maybe that's protecting us from a car wreck here and there. Another truth that I think will always be true and always be difficult to understand is that we'll never know how many times God has truly intervened in our life, because usually it's the protection against something and we've never experienced it. And we just go on our life not knowing that we've just been saved again and again and again, whether from a physical harm or a spiritual harm.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it is probably a lot more than we realize. You talked, Brian, a minute ago about like ranks in creation, right? So humans are below angels, but angels have ranks too. Like we see the differentiation between like angel and archangel, and they're called out as like chief angel, right? Or I think Sproul uses like the arch prefix as like, your primary or prime or chief enemy, your arch enemy,
So like Michael or Gabriel. Or,
and we get the named angels as the examples, but I think we're only given 2 or 3. So you have, Michael, Gabriel, and I guess Lucifer would be the third named angel. But I'm curious about what that like hierarchy is, and is it just angel, archangel, and do they have more specialized roles than that, or like how does that in Revelation? How does that come into play? Because I think it talks about Michael having a special role in like the warfare portion of that, but it is interesting that even within that there's like more ranks, and there's a whole order in the creation there that we just barely scratched the surface of what we're told.
On a slightly adjacent note, I'm convinced that God is a God of order. Like you look at civilization, you look at a marriage, what he calls into a marriage. You look at the church, the way he had set up the order of the church. Like there is structure and there's order to things, and it's all for good and protection. And so, I assume that since there is obviously some level of order, that order is for the good and the protection and the usefulness of the angels and the work that he would call those angels into.
It's in our biology. Our DNA is ordered sequences and numbers.
True.
Yeah.
Too smart, man. Yeah. Didn't cross my mind. Yeah. Anything else about as we do our best to try to bring things back into the applied theology phrase about us living in a reality of angels being present?
I think it's prudent for us to know the role of angels as Christians, and that's me personally. It was an area, a blind spot where I think the cultural view of angels had taken a bunch of space up in my mind of what their role is or what they were like, and I didn't necessarily believe there was flying babies with bows and arrows, but knowing the true purpose and role is important because we want to be careful not to attribute any sliver of the glory that's due to God to any other creature or part of creation. And that's what angels are, is creature. So maybe that's the most important applied theology piece for me, is just making sure that boundary is there. And that even if there was a crazy circumstance where I was in a car accident and was ministered to shoulder to shoulder by an angel, that all that glory is to the Father, that's an instrument of his will that's there, by my side, but it's God, and it's him using another creature in that manner. Yeah.
That's good too. What about you, Tom? Any applied stuff?
I like that. I think it's important for us to keep in mind, not to discount angels as we typically do, that we should realize that it's in Scripture very clearly, and God uses angels very clearly, and we have a tendency to, like we said earlier, we kind of discount that and not treat it maybe as seriously as we should, or take it as seriously as we should. But also remembering that we are to be faithful to the Word, and as we do that, God uses those angels in our interest, on our behalf, and so to know that and to be to remember that and believe that, but not to take it too far one way or the other, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think with kind of both you guys are saying is what crosses my mind mainly, like what angels are is good for us, practically to understand, because it does impact our life. If they're created by God, then angels are not formed by us dying. And so I think that's important when you, and I think it's important to the gospel too, that there's a redemption plan for those who are created in his image, and that is mankind, and there's this unique creation. And he is creator and we are creation. And there's a redemption plan because we have sinned and rebelled against God. And the only way to be saved is through Jesus Christ. And so in that process of the gospel going forward and taking that message out, there's going to be people that are in need of help. There's going to be missionaries that are in need of assistance. There are going to be Christians who are struggling. And God is going to utilize angels to come and do that. And just as we see in 2 Kings chapter 6, I think it was, that there's a spiritual war going on around us, and we are blind to it 99.999% of the time, and being grateful. And even if you're taking communion one Sunday and your pastor says, hey, just take a moment, thank God for what you can be thankful for. Maybe in that moment, if it comes to your mind, we can thank God for the battle that's constantly raging that the angels are taking on, and remembering that. Another thing that I think is important in the applied theology aspect. Andrew and I actually were talking a little bit as we were at the store grabbing some sandwiches because we're working in the same office for a couple of weeks. And there's this guy goes, oh, what? The checker was like, what are you talking about? And we're like, oh, just like angels and demons. And he's like, oh, like that conversation. And I said, do you believe in angels and demons? And he goes, yeah. And he lifts up his shirt and he has a picture of a saint.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the saint had wings on it. And then he said what saint it was. I was like, that's interesting because he believes that the saints, my interpretation of it is that he pointed to his sleeve as, I believe that this saint has died and now he's an angel. And I then tattooed this saint on my arm with wings because he's now an angel. And many times, maybe not all the time, but many times, people like that will even pray to those saints who they believe are not angels, and that's a complete mix-up of what's going on. And so from a applied theology aspect, that's a derailment, and I'm not trying to bag on this guy at all, but I mean, I believe that's part of the reason we do this podcast.
Yeah.
So that those things can run through our minds. Oh, the Bible teaches us that angels were created, and then a portion of them, Satan rebelled, and then the ones that took the side of Satan were all banished and sent down, and now there's a place prepared for them, for those who rebel against God, which would be hell, and then mankind comes along in their sin also, and then those of us who repent and place our faith in Jesus, we are saved and forgiven from those things, and then the ones who don't join those angels in hell in the place that was prepared for the eternal suffering. And so the angels then, they're these ministering spirits that go and do the will of God that he sees fit in humanity. And then we pray to Jesus. As Hebrews talks about angels, Jesus is above the angels. He's the ultimate high priest. So we don't need priests anymore. We don't need the intervention anymore of somebody to receive our prayers and pass them along. We can have Trinitarian prayer, right? We can pray by the Spirit through Jesus to the Father. And we're not utilizing angels or saints for that. And I think that all that comes together in applied theology when we're talking about angels to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I guess the other piece that just talking through the role of angels and understanding what they are and aren't, and talking a little bit about fallen angels and demons, it's helped me understand better what the like foil is there, the relationship between demons and angels. Because I think demons are scary, so we tend to grant them a lot of power in our own mind, right? Yeah. But if demons are tempting and distracting and tormenting, and angels are intervening and protecting and ministering, it's, two sides of the same coin. One's there to trip us up, one's there to, help us out. And
yeah, that's perfect.
It doesn't, just because an angel's fallen doesn't mean they're necessarily granted new special powers and omniscience and omnipotence and all that. Those attributes are for God only, and same with angels.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, very good stuff. Hey, well, it is time. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. One thing I wanted to point out, maybe you've already noticed it, is that we have this water bottle here. You can see we had some water bottles made. I'm sure our editor and director, Blake, will put a picture of one up there. But on the front, we have the new graphic there. And then we also, on the back, have the text of Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, which is what this podcast is all about. It says, see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ, Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. So we did have a bunch of those made, and as you can imagine, they got picked up pretty quick. I gave some away to people who have supported this project, and so we're going to have several more made. So in the future, if you wanted one of those, just message us, let us know so I can get a count. We'll get some more ordered. Also, if you look at my sweatshirt, these are our new C28 sweatshirts. They're just not done yet because the wrong graphics came in. So we're going to be making these shirts, and well, sweatshirts and water bottles, just to maybe even create conversation and draw people to the podcast a little bit. So with that, thank you, Andrew and Tom, for joining me, and we'll see you guys again in another 2 weeks. All right. With me, she wanted number 2 also. I'm like, but Emily,
Didn't she want Yoda and that one?
she got that one. So
Whoa.
Scratch and dent.
That was yours.